A win is a win, but scoring just 10 points in the fourth quarter and nearly blowing a 25-point lead against basically a G League team isn't great. Let's break down what happened in the fourth. Plus, we have bad injury news for Dyson Daniels. It's a Mardi Gras episode of a Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on Tuesday, Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras Day. I'm here to wish you a happy final day of Carnival. Hopefully you're out celebrating, honestly, instead of listening to this show right now, because the Pelicans eked out a struggle win over the Memphis Grizzlies, 96-87, being held under 100 points. Again, but a win's a win. We'll talk about it in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Plus, we have an update on Dyson Daniels. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Become an everydayer and listen Monday through Friday. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, let's get into it because, was this one rough. Pelicans beat the Memphis Grizzlies 96-87. So let's start with this, right? This is consistent with what I've said all season long. This is a good team that's winning games, that hasn't even come close to their ceiling. We don't know if they'll actually reach their ceiling, but they're not a bad team, despite them giving us some pause about how they go about things, right? A win is a win, and winning on the road in the NBA can be tough. The Pelicans are now 3-1 on this road trip. That's really good, right? Like, it's tough to get road victories, but back-to-back games scoring under 100 points against two really bad teams, basically like G League teams at times, is concerning. Scoring just 10 points in the fourth quarter in this one isn't great, right? Almost blowing a 25-point lead. This is one game where I'm glad BI has that midi because they needed it. He had back-to-back baskets and a great dish to Larry to seal the win. But this team needs to figure out some cohesion on offense, right? We'll get into the bad start and Jose Alvarado stepping in yet again to kind of save this team in the next segment. But they got behind early because they just didn't have the energy, nothing cooking on them, cooking offensively for them, and the defense was rough. And we'll get into that in the next segment as well, looking at Jonas Valanciunas. But they've got to figure out some cohesion on offense. There needs to be a general plan, and there kind of was here, to be honest with you, in the fourth quarter. Right? They were trying to go with Point Zion for the most part. However, he went 0 for 4, and this team couldn't make a shot. They were 4 of 17 in the fourth quarter. That's 23.5%. 0 for 5 from 3. Herb Jones, who's been playing well and had a good game in this one, went 0 for 2. You also had CJ McCollum go 0 for 2. CJ was 3 of 6 otherwise. Herb Jones was 3 of 4 otherwise. It wasn't like they were having bad shooting nights. It just kind of, things went cold in the fourth and they just had no idea really what to do. When you look at Zion's 4 shots, missing all 4, only one of them was like truly at the rim. He was trying to force things otherwise. And given the poor shooting they had, him wanting to take over makes sense. But this is also one of those games where you wish he had a little bit something else in his bag, whether it is that handle being a little bit better because 3 of his 4 shots were blocked, so trying to evade those guys, or some sort of mid-range jumper. But I think the mid-range, with the way they defend him, would have been blocked as well. The Pelicans just had no kind of answer to this. And as much as I've been saying I want to see more Point Zion, I don't know if that would have worked in this game, to be perfectly honest with you, it didn't, right? So you needed to rely on Brandon Ingram to bail you out, and that worked. He had the 3 biggest plays in the fourth quarter. He's the only guy that made more than 1 shot. He was really one of 4 guys to make a shot, right? Trey went 1 of 1 in the fourth. Larry Nance had that dish from Brandon Ingram. So of the Pelicans' 10 points in this one, he was basically almost like responsible for all of them. He was responsible for 6 of the 10. You can't score 10 points in a quarter. Like, you just can't. Like, I don't know what to say here. You can't do that, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know what to say, as they were just leaking points in this one. And look, they got this win more likely because the Memphis Grizzlies were just missing shots too, right? They went 0 for 7 from 3 in the fourth quarter. The Pelicans just escaped. I don't know if there's really much you can learn from this other than how do you create a little bit more space for Zion Williamson to get downhill? You know, they were getting him the ball at the top of the 3-point line, letting him drive. That's great, but maybe you need other actions in there. You know, maybe you need some other off-ball movement to try and create a little bit more space for him. Because in this one, you saw that the opponent was not respecting the Pelicans' 3-point shooters. And this is where you just need to make them pay. But when you go 0 for 5, right? Jose went 0 for 1. CJ was 0 for 2. And Herb Jones was 0 for 3. Like, that's you got to make them pay. And the team didn't. And that's one of the risks of running kind of a Zion-centric offense. I still think it's the right thing to do. I think you've got to look at process over results, as we always say here on Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But I wouldn't say that this one was particularly inspiring, right? Was there a way to get Brandon Ingram open for 3? Would that have been a better move? Or was it better just to let him get to his spot and kind of take those shots that he's comfortable with? And I think that honestly might have really been it here. But this team, you know, overall shot well from 3 in this game, right? BI took 6. I like that number, hitting 2 of them. I'm fine with that. Herb Jones was 50%. CJ was 37.5%, right? Larry made 1 of 2. Trey is still in a shooting slump, 1 of 5. Jose goes 2 for 5. Najee Marshall goes 1 for 2. They shot 37% from 3, which is a very good number for him on 35 attempts. It's more than they often take. It's just in the fourth quarter, they kind of like, I don't know, like did not look cohesive again, and trying to figure out what that is worrisome, because when are they going to figure it out? When are they going to put it together and kind of go on this run? They're 5th in the Western Conference right now, right? Like that's probably their realistic ceiling, I think, right now. When you look at the top 4 teams, those teams are all very, very close if you go look at the standings. So I'm not really upset where they are, but do we feel comfortable or confident about them going into the playoffs if it were to start, you know, in a week? And I really wouldn't be here. And that's something that, you know, ultimately you've got to kind of think a little bit about here. Literally the top 4 teams in the West are separated by 1 game. Minnesota's half a game up on the Clippers and Thunder and 1 game up on the Denver Nuggets. And then the Pelicans in 5th are 5 games back. So they're still close. That's not insurmountable. It's still not going to happen, but it's kind of fun to see how close it is there. And then you have the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th seed all within a game and a half of each other. So it's tight in the West. You've got to play good basketball. That's why, look, a win is a win. Take it. Don't complain too much, but it wasn't great here. Also, like, I don't know. No Jordan Hawkins in this one is a little bit surprising, given that Dyson Daniels, we'll talk about him in the 3rd segment here, was out. You know, maybe you needed more shooting in the second half, but it was really just kind of that fourth quarter where things started to fall apart for New Orleans. You know, they kind of held serve in the 3rd quarter. I'm not sure if there was an opportunity to play him or not. I don't know if you want to play him in the 4th quarter there, but at a certain point, you just need more offense to pile it on. And if you weren't doing that in the 3rd, maybe it was an option, but I'm not going to nitpick that one. Let's talk more, though, something else to nitpick. The lack of energy in the beginning of the game and how it could have impacted the 4th quarter here. Let's talk about that coming up here next. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, because it was Jose Alvarado who saved them yet again. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Pick more or less on the stat projection for 2 to 6 players, and then just watch the winnings roll in. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. They also offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types. And that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 when you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Mardi Gras Day, and we got a show for y'all. Go out and celebrate. Maybe don't think about the Pelicans. What was the final score? 86-87 win. That was just kind of gross, right? Like, that was just not a good game. It's just how it goes sometimes here. So if you want to know about other things going on in sports, maybe skip this one. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also now find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. That's really cool. Okay. Let's look at the Pelicans in their kind of slow start here. They won the first quarter. Let's be clear. They won the first quarter 31-26, but they found themselves behind by 8 points early on. And it took Jose Alvarado coming into the game to really uplift this team and give them the energy boost that they really needed. It was basically the whole bench mob coming on in and giving them what they needed. And that's what elevated this team for the most part. It was really interesting to see how early on certain things weren't working and Willie Green made a change quickly. First and foremost, let's start with Jose Alvarado, who saved this team yet again, right? Najee also really helped with all of this too. So thank goodness for both of those guys. You know, how important Jose is to this team, despite his limitations, cannot be overstated, right? Think about it this way. This team barely held on, and that had more to do with Memphis missing shots than anything. But what if they had a bigger cushion? What if they were up 35 instead of 25? We wouldn't have sweated this one out as much, right? What if they had played a team that had more NBA players than G League players, which the Memphis Grizzlies really don't do? How could this one have gone differently, and would we be looking at an L for the Pelicans instead of the win? Those are the type of things you've got to look at in this. Just a win is a win. They're all not made the same, and sometimes these past results can kind of be predictive of future performance, future results. And that's what's worrying about this, right? If you came out and you won that first quarter by 10, let's say, and they won it by how many in this one? Would I say they won it by, 5? So say they won it by 10, you win this game 101-87, and you feel a whole lot better. And it's not just a 9-point victory here where they got it really close late in the fourth quarter. That's what you need to be doing, right? It's foot on the gas the whole game. And this team just doesn't do that. You look at some other teams, they're capable of it, right? Look at that win over the Los Angeles Clippers where they went wire to wire. Every time the Clippers made a run, they kind of kept their foot on the gas and kept going. But in this one, you felt like they were going to lose. Against the Clippers, I didn't. So this one was just one of those kind of like eye-opening games where you get really concerned here. It also highlights, the limitations they have around Jonas Valanciunas. He had about as rough of a game as he could possibly have. And this is why they were trying to upgrade from him or look for upgrades from him at the NBA trade deadline, right? He was a minus 17 in this game. He played 17 minutes and 30 seconds. He was 1 of 4. He had 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Those numbers are good. But he was just targeted in the pick and roll, particularly early. The Memphis Grizzlies had a game plan, and they went at him. Every time he was out there on the court, they were just trying to run it right at him, and they were winning those battles more often than not. They were winning those battles every single time. And Larry Nance Jr. came in. You saw some limitations with that in the fourth quarter, but they desperately needed that kind of different, more mobile big man out there on the perimeter to limit the easy pick and roll opportunities that Memphis was getting. Again, this is the limitation with Jonas Valanciunas. This is why I've said, as much as I said, don't trade him, he's going to hurt you in the playoffs, right? Like, he's going to hurt you in the playoffs. They're going to have to deal with this in the postseason at some point. That's going to be a thing that could crash them out of there. But you know what? You got to get there in the first place. And Jonas has won them as many games as maybe he has been could lose. And look, does he match up well with the Clippers? Does he match up well with certain teams here? The Denver Nuggets and all of those teams? No, absolutely not. Does anyone match up with Nikola Jokic, though? However, the problem is, I think, where you look at this and it's like, okay, you got to get into the postseason in the first place, right? The Suns, the Clippers, the Nuggets, some of these top teams, he's going to be a liability against. But you know what? It doesn't matter if you're not playing them because you missed the playoffs, and Jonas has helped you more often than he hasn't at this point, which is why I said don't trade him at the trade deadline to make this team worse. I don't think this team is going to win an NBA title this year. Just get into the postseason, get some of that experience, figure it out this offseason, make your big move, and then go into next year really trying to be a bit more of a cohesive and different team. That's what I want to see this franchise do. That's what they did, right? So that's a good situation I think they find themselves in. But you saw the limitations, and, as much as I'm on team don't trade Jonas, it was don't trade Jonas this trade deadline because I did not see an upgrade. Daniel Gafford's having 2 good games, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he would have been a significant upgrade over Jonas Valanciunas or won them as many games as Jonas has won them. However, it was don't trade Jonas at the trade deadline. It was, if you want to trade him after this off season or during this off season after this season, because that's where I think you'll actually be able to get an upgrade, right? If Jared Allen wasn't available, if Miles Turner wasn't available, some of these other players weren't available, well then, you know what? Wait and make the move when you can maybe reignite some of those talks, look at other options here for the New Orleans Pelicans. So those are the moves that I want to see them make. But let's make no mistake, Jonas was a liability in this one, and hopefully that doesn't, hurt and keep hurting the Pelicans here against a good team. They could have lost this one. Again, I think it had more to do with Memphis missing shots than anything else here in the lack of offense for the Pelicans. But you can see why they want to change it up at the center position, as good as Jonas has been for the team and as consistent as he's been for the team. But yeah, there's limitations there. There's going to be a liability there potentially. But look, doesn't matter if you don't get there, right? If you make a conference finals and you lose to the Clippers, the Suns, because of Jonas Valanciunas, I think we're all going to call it a great season. Go home happy and knowing that this team will make a significant upgrade at the end of the year. So, I don't know, credit to Jose. Let's go back to that, just giving the energy off the bench. But if they can get that stuff figured out earlier on, I do think this team could make us a little less stressed, which would be super nice. But a win's a win. As we said, 3-1 on the road trip, right? They have a winning record on the road this season. They're 17-12. That's great. They're 15-10 at home. They're 10 games above 500 at 32-22. That's nearly winning 60% of your games. That's great. I'm happy with this team. Win's a win. Get it, move on. Let's try and get better. And, you have opportunity to go get another victory before the All-Star break Wednesday at home against the Washington Wizards, who almost just beat the Dallas Mavericks, by the way, but they're 9-43. That's bad. They're only 1 game better than the Pistons right now for the worst record in the NBA. That's kind of interesting too. So Pelicans have a chance to build a little bit momentum heading to the break, get some rest, get healthy, because health, not great right now for Dyson Daniels. Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked on Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked on Pelicans is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I want to let you know how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. Can we find some minutes for Jordan Hawkins? Please, 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 please find some minutes for Jordan Hawkins to see him grow, put more shooting out there. Maybe that makes things a little bit better for Zion Williamson and the others out there on the court. So look, therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. Become an everydayer. That's what I needed to say. Listen Monday through Friday. Tell friends about the show. This team's good. They're going into the All-Star break. Get them clued in for the final stretch run of everything here. I'm excited about it. I hope you're excited about it as well. One thing we're not excited about: injury to Dyson Daniels. From the press release, the New Orleans Pelicans announced today that guard Dyson Daniels sustained a torn lateral meniscus in his left knee. Daniels is being further evaluated to determine appropriate treatment options. A more detailed update will be provided when available. In 52 games, 15 starts this season, 15.5 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 1.4 steals in almost 22 minutes per game. Oh, that's not fun. I don't know how long he's going to be out for, but I think it's safe to say that we won't be seeing him for a little while, and that's very disappointing. This could be something that probably rules him out. I wouldn't be surprised for the rest of the regular season and probably just done for this year, which is disappointing because you really started to see him be such an impactful defender and started to build more confidence in recent weeks. Some of the dunks, some of the shot attempts at the rim from him that we weren't seeing before. His three-point shot this year, while inconsistent, was definitely improving, it felt like. And it seemed that if he could just generate a little bit of offense, he could be really good and important for this Pelicans team. And it's disappointing to see him go down like this and that we won't see him, anymore, likely anymore. I don't know for sure anymore this season. But he still has a bright future. His game and everything is not based off athleticism. So surgery and a knee injury like this don't truly worry me. This is not a guy that's like going up and down and kind of playing with a lot of verticality where those type of meniscus injuries really concern you. So I have no doubt that he'll come back, be better than ever, and really be able to make an impact on this team in the offseason. But it's a bit of a setback, right? Like these type of injuries, if they do end up taking longer, can really limit some of these guys. Kyra Lewis Jr. after his knee injury just never had another opportunity, right? Like, I don't think this will bleed into next season for Dyson Daniels, but if it does, and he's not in the rotation, it's tough to work your way back to get into that, being a younger player here with everything. So it's very much disappointing to see that this is how his season maybe ends. We'll see. We'll hopefully get a good update on everything once they've kind of looked at what they need to be doing when it comes to this. Hopefully, maybe it's just rest. We'll see. Find out more about that. Another update on the front office side of things. The Charlotte Hornets are moving Mitch Kupchak into an advisory role. They have not been good this year, though they've actually won 2 straight games, I believe, here. But they're sitting at 12-41. They're third worst in the Eastern Conference. They are going to go through a bit of a rebuild here with everything. Mitch Kupchak, their general manager, former general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers, is moving more into an advisory role. One of those things where they say advisory role is like, we're firing you, but you're under contract. And we don't want to just give you money to go away, so we're going to have you do some like other stuff for us, and we're going to move you into another area or something like that, right? Like that's what that means. Wasn't Pete Carroll with the Seahawks moved to an advisory role, not straight up fired, right? Because they don't want to just let him go and go do whatever. We may as well like have you do some work if we're paying you. That's almost always what that ends up meaning here. So there was one advisory role NBA. Wasn't there a coach, right, that they moved to in the NBA? Who was it? I can't even. It was literally the Wizards, who we're going to see on Wednesday. They moved Wes Unseld Jr. to a front office advisory role, right? Like they were firing him, but it's like you're under contract, so we're going to put you somewhere else. Like that's entirely what this is. It also lets you get a jump on getting your replacement in the building. A replacement who, in the reports about this, I think it was over at The Athletic, was Trajan Langdon from the New Orleans Pelicans. Langdon is the general manager of the Pelicans. He's essentially second in command, though not exactly that, to David Griffin, who's the executive vice president of basketball operations. Trajan Langdon has handled a lot of the scouting, a lot of the G League, and kind of the player personnel side of everything. And when you look at some of the drafting that this team has done, things have looked very good. Herb Jones has been great. We have high hopes for Trey Murphy. Jordan Hawkins looks like he was the exact right pick pick for the Pelicans here. You can throw in Jose Alvarado with all of that too. EJ Liddell, there's still potential there for a lot of that. Dyson Daniels. All of those are guys that he's really had a hand in. So hearing his name get brought up for another to just run the front office and essentially be the number one guy, isn't necessarily shocking. Langdon was, in the running for David Griffin's job, essentially. When they made that hire, they thought very highly of him. They wanted to bring him in and have him be involved, and certainly paid a lot of money to do that, to bring him in. He's been that, I think, sought out through a number of teams around the league. So it was probably only a matter of time before he was going to have kind of the opportunity to be the number one guy, run a team, run a franchise. I don't know if Charlotte's exactly what you want to do with that, but there is potential there that he could be poached and end up taking that job, and I think that says something good about what New Orleans is doing here. If this was a dumpster fire, if they weren't fifth in the West, if things were bad, certainly other teams wouldn't be looking to poach some of the people here. This says something about what they've done here, what they're building here in New Orleans. So we'll see where that goes. Certainly would like to keep them, but you want guys to kind of go get their jobs and do their thing, and it'll allow New Orleans the opportunity to bring someone else in who's maybe young and up and coming and continue to kind of build that sustainable success, sustainable winning, just sustainability in general, like they need in a small market team. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Happy Mardi Gras. Go celebrate now. I know I'm about to go do that. We'll see about a tomorrow show, Wednesday show. We'll find out. More likely than not, I would say. I'm going to try and be good today. So thank you all for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This has been the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all maybe tomorrow.